She moved before they finished surrounding her. The first warrior came from the left, big, broad, confident in the way men are when they outnumber someone 5 to 1. He never reached her. Her elbow caught his jaw on the turn, and he hit the snow before he knew she had moved. The second came from behind. She heard him, she always heard them, and dropped low, sweeping his legs clean out from under him. He fell hard. The third and fourth came together, which was a mistake. She used one against the other, driving the larger man into his partner with enough force to crack ribs on both sides. The fifth stopped. He looked at his 4 companions groaning in the snow. He looked at her. She was not even breathing hard. He ran. 13 seconds. That was all it took. Seraphine Voss wiped the blood from her knuckle, adjusted the strap of her pack, and kept walking. The blizzard didn't care. The wind didn't slow. The road ahead was dark and long and frozen, and she had been walking roads like this for 10 years. She knew how to walk through the cold. She had learned how to walk through everything. What she did not know, could not have known, was that someone had watched every second of it. From the ridge above the tree line, Alpha King Kaelan Draven sat on his horse and said absolutely nothing. Beside him, his beta Braden exhaled slowly, the fog of his breath catching in the frozen air. An Omega, Braden said. It was not quite a question. Kaelan didn't answer. He was still watching her. She hadn't looked up, not once, not toward the ridge, not toward anything except the road. She just walked. Alone and unbothered and completely, unervingly unbothered, as if 5 men in the snow were a minor inconvenience she had already forgotten. He had not seen anyone move like that in a long time. He had not felt his chest tighten at the sight of someone in a long time either. He told himself it was curiosity. He was a king. Curiosity was allowed. He nudged his horse forward and rode down. She heard him before she saw him. Of course she did. She turned slowly, one hand loose at her side, close to her blade but not reaching for it yet. Her eyes were sharp and dark and completely unreadable when she looked at him. "You're bleeding," he said. "It's not mine," she said. A beat. He almost smiled. "The next village is half a day's walk in this storm," he said. "I have men. And horses. The offer is escort, nothing more." She looked at him the way she might look at a trap she hadn't identified yet. Calculating. Patient. He had the strange feeling she was seeing things about him he hadn't decided to show. "Why?" she asked. "Because I watched what just happened," he said, "and I'd rather have you traveling in the same direction than against it." She said nothing for a long moment. Then she nodded once and fell into step beside his horse. Not behind it. Beside it. He noticed. Braden noticed too, though he had the good sense to say nothing. They rode in silence. Seraphine didn't fill it with conversation, which Kaelan found unexpectedly refreshing. Most people talked too much around him. They performed. She simply existed in the space without apology. He kept his eyes on the road. She kept hers ahead. But twice, just twice, their glances crossed in the dark, and neither of them looked away immediately. The castle rose out of the storm like something from an older world. Stone walls black with age, torch fire cutting orange lines through the white. Seraphine's expression didn't change as they rode through the gates, but her eyes moved, cataloging, mapping, noting every exit with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned the hard way that exits matter. The pack was waiting. Word traveled fast in any pack, and the sight of their Alpha King returning with an unknown woman drew the kind of attention that comes wrapped in whispers. She felt them, the stares, the judgments, the instant and comfortable assumption that an Omega alone in winter could only be one kind of thing. She had spent 10 years being underestimated. She had learned to use it. Then she saw Petra. The girl couldn't have been more than 16, small and pale, carrying a bundle of linens twice her size through the crowded courtyard. A guard, thick-necked, pleased with himself, knocked the bundle from her arms with a careless shove and laughed when she scrambled to gather it. Nobody moved. Nobody said anything. Seraphine was already walking. She stepped between the guard and the girl without a word, crouched down, and picked up the scattered linens herself. She held them out to Petra. The girl stared at her with wide, frightened eyes, as if kindness itself had become something to be suspicious of. Seraphine understood that look. She had worn it herself once. "Go," Seraphine said quietly. Not unkindly. The girl went. The guard stepped forward. "Who do you think?" "I think," Seraphine said, rising slowly and turning to face him with an expression so utterly calm it was more threatening than anger, "that you should walk away." He looked at her. He looked at the Alpha King, who was watching from his horse with an expression that offered no rescue whatsoever. The guard walked away. The courtyard was very quiet. Kaylin looked at Seraphine for a moment. She wasn't performing. She hadn't done it for the crowd. She had done it because it needed doing, and the difference between those two things was everything. He dismounted without a word and led her inside. That night, she sat alone in the library with a book she wasn't reading, and the fire threw long shadows across walls lined with histories of pacts that no longer existed. She knew something about that. She knew something about being the last record of a thing that had been erased. She heard the door open and didn't look up. Kaylin sat down across from her. He didn't ask permission. She didn't protest. They existed in the quiet together for a while, the fire between them, the storm pressing against the windows outside. "You don't sleep," he said eventually. "Not much," she said. Another silence. Then, slowly, the way someone speaks when they haven't spoken a truth in a very long time and have almost forgotten how, "My pack was called the Ashvin," she said. "Before." Kaylin didn't move. Didn't prompt her. Just listened, and that stillness, that rare quality of a person who could be fully present without demanding anything in return, was what undid her careful silence. She hadn't meant to say anything. She never did. But the fire was warm, and the room was quiet, and she was so tired of carrying it alone. "My father was Alpha," she said. "My mother was Luna. I was trained from the time I could walk, how to lead, how to fight, how to read people, how to hold a pack together in the moments when everything wants to fall apart. By the time I was 16, I could spar every senior warrior in the pack and win half those matches. By 18, I won all of them." She paused. "My father said I would be the greatest Luna the Ashvin had ever seen." The fire crackled. "There was a beta," she continued. "Malachar Vorn. He had been with our pack since before I was born. My father trusted him completely. I trusted him completely." Her jaw tightened. "There was a feast. A celebration, my formal presentation as Lunaire. Malachar arranged everything. The food. The wine." She stopped. "I woke up in the snow 2 days later. The pack house was ash. My parents were gone. Every senior warrior who might have fought for the bloodline, gone." She looked at the fire. "He had poisoned the wine. All of it. Everyone who drank it." "Why didn't you drink?" Kaylin asked quietly. "I didn't like the vintage," she said simply. "I had stepped away to get water from the kitchen. A small thing. A ridiculous, random, small thing, and it is the only reason I am alive." The silence that followed was heavy and honest, and neither of them tried to fill it with false comfort. "I spent 2 years hiding," she continued. "Learning how to disappear. Then I spent the next 8 learning how to reappear, on my terms. I have been working my way back to Malachar ever since. He controls the Ashvin territory now. He calls himself Alpha." Her voice didn't waver, but her hands, folded in her lap, pressed together harder. "He is not Alpha. He is a thief wearing a dead man's title. And I am going to take it back." Kaylin was quiet for a long time. Then, "I understand waiting," he said. "For something. Towards something. When the waiting is the only thing keeping you upright." She looked at him then, really looked, the way she hadn't permitted herself before. He was staring at the fire with an expression she recognized. Not grief exactly. Grief had an edge to it, a rawness. This was grief that had been lived with so long it had become part of the architecture of a person's face. "Ligia," she said. Not a question. He didn't ask how she knew. 3 winters, he said. She made everything make sense. And then she didn't. He exhaled. "I kept leading because there was no other option. The pack needed a king. But somewhere between the crown and the grief, I think I forgot how to be a person." Seraphine nodded slowly. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say it would get better. She said, "You're still leading. That is not a small thing. Most men would have collapsed inward. You didn't." He looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes, gratitude, maybe, or recognition. The particular relief of being seen without being handled. "You would have led too," he said. "Whatever happened." "I know," she said. And the certainty in it wasn't arrogance. It was the voice of someone who had survived the unsurvivable and come out the other side knowing exactly what they were made of. They sat until the fire burned low. Neither of them moved to leave. Outside, the storm had quieted to a murmur, and the castle settled into the deep silence of late night, and 2 people who had been alone for a very long time were, for one small hour, not alone. Then the morning came with screaming at the gates. Seraphine was already dressed and armed before the second horn call sounded. She reached the courtyard before most of the pack had processed what was happening, and what she saw stopped her blood cold. Malachar Vorn rode through the gates on a black horse with 30 soldiers at his back, draped in the colors of the Ashvin, her pack's colors, worn like stolen jewelry. He was older than she remembered. Harder. The kind of man that power had not refined but calcified. He scanned the courtyard with the flat confidence of someone accustomed to rooms rearranging themselves around his presence. His eyes found her immediately. He smiled. It did not reach anything behind it. "There she is," he said, loud enough for the whole courtyard to hear. "My lost Omega. Seraphine, I've been looking for you for a long time." The pack stirred. Omega. The word landed like a deliberate insult, a public diminishment, a cage of a word he was trying to lock her inside in front of witnesses. Kaelan stepped forward. "This is my territory," he said, his voice carrying the particular authority of a man who had never needed to raise it. "You ride into it with soldiers uninvited and make claims on a guest in my house. Choose your next words carefully." Malachar spread his hands in a gesture of false reasonableness. "With respect, my lord, the woman is a fugitive from Ashvin lands. I am simply here to collect what belongs to me and I am not yours." The courtyard went silent. Seraphine had stepped forward. Not toward Kaelan, in front of him. Her voice was quiet and absolute, the voice of someone who had been rehearsing this moment for 10 years and had finally run out of reasons to wait. "I am Seraphine Voss," she said. "Daughter of Alpha Idrin Voss and Luna Mira Voss of the Ashvin pack. Trained Lunaire. Rightful blood authority of the Ashvin bloodline." She let that land. Let the courtyard hear it. Let the 30 soldiers behind Malachar look at each other. "You poisoned my pack, stole my home, and wore my father's title as you earned it." She held Malachar's gaze without blinking. "I challenge you. Single combat. At dawn." The silence was enormous. Malachar stared at her. Something flickered behind the flat confidence, fast, quickly buried. Fear, dressed up as contempt. "An Omega challenges me," he said, loud, performing for his soldiers. "A Luna challenges you," she said. "There is a difference. Prepare yourself." She turned and walked back inside. She did not look at Kaelan. She did not look at the crowd. She walked with the steady, unhurried calm of someone who has already decided the outcome and is simply waiting for the world to catch up. Behind her, she heard Braden say something quiet to Kaelan. Heard Kaelan's response, even quieter. Don't interfere." She almost smiled. That night, in the torchlit training yard, she moved through her forms alone until she heard boots on stone and turned to find Kalen there, his jacket off, his expression focused in the way it got when he was thinking about something too hard to say aloud. "You don't have to train me," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm not." He picked up a training blade. "But I watched Malakar fight at a summit 3 years ago. He drops his left guard when he overextends on a right side attack. It's a small window. Less than a second. But you," he looked at her, "something careful and warm in it, you would see it." She looked at him for a moment. This man had nothing to gain from helping her. Who had every political reason to hand her over and smooth things with Malakar and keep his territory uncomplicated. Who was here in a cold training yard at midnight, giving her the one piece of information that might end a fight faster than anything else. "Why?" she asked again. The same question as the road. But this time it meant something different. He met her eyes. "Because you are right," he said. "And because you would win anyway. I just want to make sure of it." They trained until the cold stopped being cold. Until the distance between them kept closing, and neither of them moved to stop it. Until they were standing very close in the hush of the early hours, breathing the same air, and the space between them was charged with everything neither of them had said, and both of them knew. "Try to sleep," he said finally. "You too," she said. Neither of them would. And they both knew that, too. Dawn came like a held breath finally released. The field outside the castle had been cleared of snow in the hours before light. Seraphine didn't know who had done it, but when she walked out with the first pale streak of morning at her back, she saw the ground was flat and dark and waiting, and both packs lined the edges like a living wall of witnesses. Every face was turned toward the center. Every breath made fog in the cold. She walked out alone. Malakar was already there. He had dressed for performance, polished armor, the Ashfin colors displayed prominently, his 30 soldiers arranged behind him like theater. He wanted this to look like an execution. A spectacle. A lesson about what happened to Omegas who forgot their place. He did not know what she had spent 10 years becoming. She stopped 10 feet from him and rolled her shoulders once, loosening the tension that had gathered there in the sleepless night. She had not slept. She had not tried. She had sat in the dark with her father's face in her memory and her mother's laugh and the warmth of the pack house before the fire ate it, and she had let herself feel all of it, the grief, the rage, the years of cold roads and careful silence, and then she had folded it all into something quiet and still and absolutely immovable at the center of her chest. She was not fighting from anger today. Anger was too fast, too imprecise. She was fighting from something older and steadier than that. She was fighting for the 10 years she had survived when she was supposed to be Ash. "Last chance to withdraw," Malakar said, loud, performing. "No one will think less of you, girl." "Begin," she said. He came at her fast, faster than she expected for a man his age, and she adjusted immediately, moving sideways rather than back, denying him the satisfaction of making her retreat. He was strong. He was experienced. And he was angry in the way that men are when something they consider beneath them refuses to behave accordingly. That anger made him powerful. It also made him sloppy. He taunted her as they moved. About her father. About the night of the feast, the details designed to destabilize, to puncture her focus with grief. She heard every word and let them fall past her like snow. She was not here for his words. She was here for his left guard. He came at her with a brutal right side combination, 4 strikes, fast and hard and meant to overwhelm. She deflected the first 3, and on the 4th, she saw it. The window. Less than a second, exactly as Kalen had said, his arm extended too far, his left side open for just a fraction of a heartbeat. She didn't hesitate. 1 strike, precise and devastating, to the joint of his weapon arm. His blade hit the ground. Her elbow came up and caught his jaw on the follow-through, and then her foot swept his legs, and Malakar Vorn, the man who had poisoned her family, stolen her home, worn her father's name for 10 years, was flat on his back in the dark earth with her blade at his throat. The field was completely silent. She was breathing hard. He was breathing harder. His eyes, looking up at her, had shed every layer of the performance, the contempt, the confidence, the comfortable assumption of his own invincibility, and what was left was something small and exposed and very afraid. "Yield," she said quietly, "or answer for what you did." A long moment. The kind that seems to last longer than it has any right to. "I yield," he said. She stepped back. She lowered her blade. She turned to face the field, both packs, the soldiers, the courtyard full of watching eyes, and then something happened that she had not prepared herself for. From the far edge of the crowd, 3 figures moved forward slowly. Then 5. Then a dozen. People she did not recognize at first, their faces older and changed by years, but then one of them, a woman with gray threading through her dark hair and tears running freely down her face, dropped to one knee. Then the others followed. One by one. The surviving members of the Ashvin pack, who had tracked Malachar here in secret, who had waited in the dark for this exact moment. They knelt for her. Seraphine's throat closed. She had not cried in 10 years. She had made herself a promise in the snow the morning she woke up with ash in her hair and silence where her pack used to be. She had promised herself she would not cry until it was over. Until she had done what needed to be done. It was over now. She let herself cry. Quietly, without drama, the tears came down her face in the cold morning air while her pack, knelt in the dark earth and came home. She heard footsteps behind her and felt Kaelan stop at her side. Not in front. Not behind. Beside. He didn't speak. He didn't try to make anything of the moment. He simply stood there and let her have it, and that, more than anything, more than the fight or the yield or the pack on its knees, was what broke something loose in the iron grip she had kept on her own heart for a very long time. Later, when the crowd had dispersed, and Malachar had been escorted out under guard, and the castle had begun the slow exhale of released tension, she and Kaelan walked the ramparts in the thin winter sunshine, and he said what he had been building toward for days. "I want to propose something," he said. "Not a takeover. Not an absorption. An alliance. The Ashvin pack and mine, equals in governance, equals in decisions, separate in identity but unified in strength." He stopped walking and looked at her. "And I would like, if you are willing, for that alliance to be led by us. Together." She looked at him for a long time. She thought about the 10 years of roads. The careful solitude. The walls she had built were so high and so thick that she had almost forgotten there was something worth protecting inside them. "Equal in all things," she said. "In all things," he said. "I don't want a Luna I present to the pack. I want a partner I answer to." She looked at the land below the ramparts, the fields and forests and the distant tree line where the roads ran toward everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. Then she extended her hand. He took it. His grip was warm and steady, and she felt something in her chest, something that had been braced and held and fortified for 10 long years, quietly, finally, relax. 3 weeks later, the scouts came in from the eastern border with bad news. The Stonecrest pack had moved troops to the edge of the new alliance's territory, probing, testing, betting that 2 packs newly joined were too fragile to respond with any coherence. It was a calculated provocation designed to expose the seams of something untested. Seraphine was in the war room before the scouts finished their report. She spread the maps and studied them with the focused efficiency that had become, in the short weeks since the duel, something the pack had learned to recognize as the precursor to a solution. She didn't speak for several minutes. The generals waited. Brayden waited. Kaelan leaned against the wall with his arms crossed and the particular expression he had when he was watching her think, attentive, unhurried, genuinely interested in where she was going to land. "They expect a frontal response," she said finally. "They want to test whether we can move fast enough and in coordination. So we don't move fast. We move smart." She traced 2 lines on the map, a pincer movement that bypassed the Stonecrest's forward troops entirely and cut their supply route from the mountain pass. They run out of food in 6 days if that pass is closed. They're not trying to start a war. They're trying to find a weakness. We show them there isn't one. The generals looked at each other. It's a long march in winter, one of them said carefully. It is, she agreed. And they'll know we can do it. That matters more than whether the march is comfortable. Kalen looked at Braden. Braden looked at the map. Then he looked at Seraphine with an expression that had been slowly shifting for weeks, from wariness to assessment to something that was almost, finally, respect. She's right, Braden said. Simple. No qualification. She is right. They executed the strategy in 4 days. The Stonecrest Alpha arrived at the border on the 5th day, not with weapons drawn but with an envoy flag raised, asking for a meeting. The Stonecrest warriors at the forward position had been cut off from their supplies without a single engagement. There was nothing to fight. The meeting was brief. Terms were set. The Stonecrest Alpha, a hard man accustomed to taking what he wanted, looked across the table at Seraphine and something in his expression shifted, not quite respect, not yet, but the beginning of the acknowledgement that she was something he had not accounted for in his calculations. She was comfortable with that. She had been underestimated her whole life. She had learned to treat it as an advantage. When they rode back through the castle gates, Kalen pulled his horse alongside hers and said, quietly enough that only she could hear, I want to ask you something. Tomorrow. In front of everyone. She looked at him. All right, she said. She didn't sleep that night either. But for the first time in 10 years, it wasn't the weight of the past that kept her awake. The morning he chose was clear and cold and brilliant, the kind of winter day that feels like the world has been washed clean overnight. Both packs were gathered in the great courtyard, the Ashfin survivors integrated now, standing among Kalen's people with the tentative ease of something new that was beginning to feel, slowly, like something permanent. Kalen stood at the center of the courtyard. He had not arranged a platform, had not organized any formal procession. He was simply standing there in the morning light, and when the crowd settled into quiet, he spoke. Tradition says an Alpha King announces his Luna, he said. His voice was calm and clear and carried easily across the courtyard. He presents her. Declares her. As if she is something to be conferred rather than someone to be chosen. He paused. I don't believe in that tradition. The courtyard was very still. He turned to face Seraphine, where she stood at the edge of the crowd. She had not known he intended this, not the specifics of it, not the public nature of it, and his expression was open in a way she had watched him learn, slowly and with effort, over the past weeks. The armor of grief still lived in him, it always would, but he had learned to exist alongside it rather than inside it. She had watched him choose that, day by day. She knew what it cost. Seraphine Voss, he said. You are the most capable person I have ever watched lead. You are the fiercest person I have ever watched fight. And you are the only person I have met, in 3 winters of silence, who made the silence feel like something worth ending. He didn't look away from her. I am not presenting you to anyone. I am asking you. In front of everyone who serves us both, will you stand beside me? Not behind. Not in front. Beside. As a partner. As an equal. As my mate, if you'll have me. The courtyard held its breath. Seraphine looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the road. The blizzard. The 13 seconds that had changed everything. She thought about the library and the fire and the ramparts in winter sunshine. She thought about her father teaching her footwork in the pack house courtyard and her mother's laugh, and the ash in her hair on the morning she woke up alone. She thought about 10 years of surviving, of waiting, of keeping everything locked down tight because the cost of losing something you loved was a price she had already paid once and could not afford to pay again. And then she thought about what it felt like to stand beside someone and have the silence feel like company instead of absence. Yes, she said. The cheer that went up from both packs was spontaneous and enormous, the kind of sound that comes from people who have been watching something build and have been waiting for it to arrive. Petra was crying somewhere in the crowd, Seraphine could hear her, and even Braden, that careful and contained man, was smiling the way people do when they finally admit to themselves that they have been hoping for something. The bonding ceremony that evening was entirely their own. No traditional presentation. No formality beyond what they chose. They stood before both packs in the firelight and spoke their own words, promises made not because tradition demanded them but because they meant them, which is the only way promises hold. After, they walked the ramparts together in the dark, the way they had taken to doing in the evenings when the weight of leading needed a few minutes of not being anything to anyone. Below them, the castle was warm and lit and full of the sound of two packs beginning, slowly, to become one thing. "I want to rebuild the Ashfin pack house," she said. "Not instead of this. Alongside it. A second seat. So the bloodline has a home again. Then we'll build it," he said. It was that simple with him. It had taken her a long time to stop waiting for conditions to appear. "Kaelin," she said. "Yes. I'm glad you rode down from that ridge." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "So am I," he said. "Every day I'm glad of it." The years that followed were not without difficulty. An alliance of two packs required constant tending, political tensions, old grudges between families, the slow work of trust being built among people who had been strangers. There were disputes and hard conversations and nights when the enormity of what they were trying to build felt heavier than either of them could carry alone. But they had made each other a promise, and they were both people who kept their promises. The Ashfin pack house rose from new timber in the spring of the second year, smaller than the original, but solid, real, standing in the same valley where it had once stood before Malakar's ambition burned it to nothing. Seraphine stood in front of it for a long time, the morning it was completed. Kaelin stood beside her and didn't say anything, because he had learned that some moments don't need words, and she would tell him what she was feeling when she was ready. "My father would have liked you," she said finally. "Tell me about him," he said. She did. Their children came, 3 of them, loud and curious and entirely themselves. The eldest daughter had Seraphine's precision and Kaelin's patience, a combination that was quietly devastating in any disagreement. The middle son had a gift for strategy that appeared fully formed at the age of 7 and never stopped developing. The youngest was the most like both of them together, fierce and tender in equal measure, the kind of child who wept over injured birds and then organized their siblings into defense formations when the neighboring pack's children came too close to the border. Seraphine taught them all to fight. She taught them to read a room before they spoke in it. She taught them that authority was not a possession to be held but a responsibility to be carried, and that the difference between a leader who was feared and a leader who was followed was the difference between a cage and a choice. Kaelin taught them about patience. About listening. About the weight of grief and how to carry it without letting it become a wall. He taught them his late Luna Lygia's name and told them stories about her so she remained a presence in their lives, part of the family's history rather than a shadow over it, because he had learned, slowly and with Seraphine's help, that honoring the past and embracing the present were not competing acts. They were, if anything, the same act. Love did not run out. It compounded. It grew in the keeping of it. The Stonecrest pack became an ally in the 3rd year. The packs to the south came in the 5th. By the 7th year, the alliance had expanded beyond what either of them had mapped that morning on the ramparts, and the name of their combined territory was spoken with the kind of respect that takes years to build and can only be earned, not claimed. Malakar Vorn lived out his days in a monitored exile, stripped of the Ashfin colors, stripped of the title he had stolen, left to exist in the particular purgatory of a man who had gambled everything on ambition and lost it to the girl he had left for dead in the snow. He never attempted to reclaim anything. She suspected, in her more generous moments, that he had enough self-awareness to understand that there was nothing left to claim. She was less generous in other moments. She was human in that way, which she had learned to accept. When Kaelin died, peacefully, in the warmth of their room, with her hand in his and the sound of the pack going about its evening outside the window, she sat with him for a long time before she called anyone. She had known it was coming. He had known too. They had not wasted the knowing on dread. They had spent it on presence, on the accumulated weight of ordinary evenings that had added up to something extraordinary. She led for 7 years more. Longer than she had expected, shorter than she had hoped. In those years, she wrote down everything, the story of the Ashfin Pack, the story of the Alliance, the story of the road and the blizzard, and the 13 seconds that changed everything. She wrote it so it would exist after her. So her children and her children's children would know where they came from and what had been survived to give them the world they were standing in. She died as she had lived, on her own terms, at a time and in a manner that felt, somehow, entirely chosen. They buried her beside Kaelin on the hill above the castle. 2 headstones, equal in size, facing the same direction. The stone carver asked what words she would have wanted on hers. Her eldest daughter, who had her mother's precision and her father's patience, thought about it for a long moment. She said, she came back. 3 words. The carver asked if she wanted more. No, said her daughter. That's everything. In the valley below, the combined pack went about the business of the day, the ordinary, extraordinary, irreplaceable business of a people who were safe, and fed, and home. The wolves ran the tree lane at dusk the way they always had. The fires came on in the windows as the dark came down. And on the hill above it all, 2 headstones stood equal in the last light, and the world they had built together went on. If this story moved you, if it kept you here until the very last word, then you already know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe so you never miss a story like this one, and drop a comment below telling us which moment hit you the hardest. Was it the 13 seconds? The bonding ceremony? Or the 2 equal headstones at the end? We read every single one. See you in the next story.